This simple clay pot could rewrite the history of technology. It is known as the Baghdad Battery, and its true purpose remains one of archaeology's most captivating enigmas. Was this ancient vessel a source of electric power, a sacred object for priests, or something far more ordinary? We are about to investigate all the clues, and by the end, you will have the evidence to decide for yourself. We will uncover why a 2,000-year-old jar can generate a spark of modern controversy, and what its missing parts reveal about a lost world. Does our understanding of the ancient past have a blind spot for brilliant, unconventional inventions? In 1936, just outside the modern city of Baghdad, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig made a startling find. While excavating an ancient Parthian site believed to be 2,000 years old, his team uncovered a simple, unassuming clay jar. It was about 5.5 inches tall, a vessel that would not have looked out of place holding wine or grain, but its contents told a different story entirely. Inside this jar was a carefully rolled copper cylinder, sealed at the base with a cap of asphalt, and through the center of this asphalt plug ran an iron rod, suspended perfectly within the copper cylinder without touching its sides. To Koenig, an educated man familiar with the emerging science of electricity, the assembly looked eerily familiar. It bore an uncanny resemblance to a simple galvanic cell, the kind that creates a small electric current through a chemical reaction. The clay pot itself could have acted as the container for an acidic or vinegar-like liquid, an electrolyte that would complete the circuit between the two different metals. The immediate implication was staggering. Had someone in antiquity, long before the names Volta or Galvani entered the scientific lexicon, stumbled upon the principles of electrochemistry? The discovery sent a ripple of excitement through the small academic community of the time. Yet, for every voice of wonder, there was another of profound skepticism. Could this truly be an ancient battery, or was it merely a convenient storage container for sacred scrolls? The iron rod simply a rusted core from a long rotted parchment. The object was too deliberate, too carefully constructed to be a mere accident of decay. But without a clear purpose described in any text, the Baghdad Battery was instantly branded a puzzle, an anomaly that challenged the established timeline of human invention. The design of this artifact is deceptively simple, yet it contains the precise components needed for a basic chemical reaction. To understand how the Baghdad Battery might have worked, we need to think of it not as a mysterious relic, but as a simple circuit. Inside the clay jar, we have two key players, the copper cylinder and the iron rod. These two metals are fundamentally different in their desire to react. Iron is more active, more willing to give up its electrons, while copper is more stable, more content to receive them. This difference in desire is what scientists call a potential difference, and it is the very heart of electrical power. Now imagine these two metals submerged in a common acidic liquid, perhaps vinegar or fermented grape juice. This liquid is the catalyst, the electrolyte. It allows a subtle dance of particles to begin. The acidic solution slowly eats away at the iron rod, causing it to release tiny, negatively charged particles called electrons. These electrons naturally want to travel to the more stable copper, but they cannot swim through the liquid. Instead, they are forced to take the long way around, flowing up the iron rod. If a wire were connected between the iron rod and the copper cylinder, the electrons would happily surge along this path, creating a flow of electric current. Even without a wire, if you were to touch both metals at the same time with a moist finger, you would complete the circuit, and a faint tingle of that current would be possible. The asphalt seal plays a crucial role in this process, acting as an insulator to prevent the electrons from taking a shortcut directly through the electrolyte, forcing them to travel the productive path through a potential external circuit. The entire assembly becomes a primitive but functional battery, a device that converts chemical energy into a small, steady stream of electricity. It would not have been powerful, perhaps producing only around 1 volt, barely enough to power a tiny modern watch. But in a world lit only by fire, even the faintest spark of controllable electricity would have been a profound and shocking discovery. So if this was indeed a battery, what possible use could such a weak current have served in the ancient world? The answer to that question lies not in grand machines, but in objects of subtle wonder. The true test of any ancient mystery lies in its ability to function in the modern world. Decades after its discovery, an American engineer named Willard Gray decided to put the Baghdad Battery to the test. He constructed a meticulous replica using copper and iron and filling the clay jar with a common electrolyte like grape juice. When he connected a voltmeter to the terminals, the needle moved. It registered a small but undeniable electrical current around 1 volt, proving that the object could indeed work as a primitive battery. This was not a theoretical idea anymore, it was a tangible, measurable fact. Later, the team from the television show Mythbusters took on the challenge, building multiple copies and experimenting with different electrolytes. They confirmed Gray's results, achieving up to 2 volts by using more potent acids like lemon juice. To give the audience a visual, they even connected several of their replicas together in a series, creating enough voltage to power a small light bulb or produce a distinct metallic tingle on the tongue. The proof of concept was solid, the device worked, yet this is where the mystery deepens, because proving something can generate electricity is very different from proving that it was used for that purpose. A single battery produces only a faint whisper of power, seemingly useless on its own. So why would anyone in antiquity go to the trouble of creating such a precise object for such a negligible effect? The answer may not lie in the power of one battery, but in the potential of many. The most compelling explanation for this ancient power source lies in the art of illusion, the craft of making one metal look like another. This theory suggests the Baghdad Battery was used for electroplating, a process that uses a small electric current to deposit a thin layer of one metal onto the surface of another. Imagine taking a simple silver ornament and, through the magic of chemistry, giving it the brilliant, lasting luster of gold. The process is elegantly simple. You would submerge the silver object you wish to plate into a solution containing dissolved gold particles. Then, you connect that object to the negative terminal of your battery, making it the cathode. The positive terminal is connected to a piece of pure gold, which becomes the anode. When the circuit is completed, the weak electric current coaxes the gold particles to leave the anode, travel through the solution, and gently bond to the surface of the silver object. The result is a perfectly gilded item, a piece that looks and feels like solid gold but uses only a microscopic fraction of the precious metal. What makes this theory so plausible is the historical context. The Mesopotamians and later the Parthians were master metalworkers, renowned for creating intricate gilded artifacts. Museums hold countless objects from this region, an era where a thin film of gold adorns a base of silver or copper. The conventional explanation has always been that they used mercury-based fire gilding, a dangerous and toxic process. But what if they also possessed a quieter, more controlled method? A single battery would be insufficient, but connecting several in a series, as the Mythbusters demonstrated, could have provided enough steady current to slowly and meticulously plate small items. This would not require a grand industrial operation, just a patient artisan working in a secluded corner of a workshop, using a stack of clay pots to create objects of wonder and value. The technology fits the known skills of the culture perfectly. Yet, if this theory is so elegant, why is it not universally accepted? The answer, as always in archaeology, comes down to a single, frustrating absence. But for all its intriguing potential, the electroplating theory faces a wall of powerful objections from a skeptical academic community. The most glaring absence is any trace of the essential accessories that a functioning battery would require. Where are the wires? Not a single shred of metal wire, no fragments of conductive material have ever been found with these jars. Without wires to connect the positive and negative terminals, either to each other or to an object meant to be plated, the device is an incomplete circuit, a car with no wheels. Furthermore, if these cells were used repeatedly with an acidic electrolyte, the iron rod inside should show significant and distinctive corrosion. Yet the surviving rods show only the kind of rust one would expect from simple age and burial, not the accelerated, localized pitting caused by a sustained chemical reaction. Perhaps the most damning evidence, however, is the silence of history itself. We have extensive records from these ancient cultures, texts detailing everything from medical recipes to complex astronomical calculations. We have intricate artwork depicting scenes of daily life, craftsmanship, and ritual. In all of this, there is not a single hieroglyph, cuneiform tablet, or painted fresco that even hints at the knowledge of electricity, the use of wires, or the process of electroplating. For a technology that would have been revolutionary, its complete omission from the historical record is deafening. This suggests that if the Baghdad Battery was indeed a power source, it was a forgotten spark, a technological dead end that never ignited a wider flame. So if it was not a battery, what other purpose could such a carefully crafted object have served? Perhaps we have been looking at this object with entirely modern eyes. What if this was not a piece of ancient technology, but a sacred reliquary, a protector of words rather than a producer of power? This leads us to the first major alternative theory, that the Baghdad Battery was a specially designed container for storing religious or magical scrolls. In this interpretation, the iron rod served a purely practical purpose as a sturdy core. A precious scroll made of papyrus or parchment would have been carefully rolled around this iron bar. This scroll rod assembly was then slid inside the protective copper cylinder, which acted as a shield against physical damage. Finally, the entire unit was sealed inside the clay jar with a thick plug of asphalt, creating an airtight and waterproof barrier against the humid Mesopotamian air. This was not a battery, but a time capsule for sacred knowledge. The cultural context makes this theory remarkably plausible. This was a world where written words held immense, tangible power. Incantations, prayers, and ritual texts were not merely read, they were believed to be active forces. Protecting such a scroll from decay or defilement would have been of paramount importance. Sealing it within layers of metal and asphalt was a way to consecrate it, to set it apart from ordinary objects and preserve its magical or religious potency for generations. A rotting scroll was a powerless scroll, so this simple clay pot could represent the ultimate act of preservation, a desperate and careful attempt to make certain words last forever. Yet, if this was a common practice for safeguarding important texts, why have we not found more of these vessels, many of them still holding the fragile remains of their precious contents? Another possibility is that this object was a high-end container for something precious and fleeting. Imagine a world without glass bottles or plastic seals, where preserving the potent scent of a rare perfume or the healing power of a medicinal oil was a constant challenge. The design of this jar offers a brilliant solution. The copper cylinder inside would have been an excellent, non-reactive vessel for holding expensive liquids, protecting them from the porous clay of the outer pot. The true genius, however, lies in that asphalt seal. Asphalt is a remarkable natural waterproofing agent. A thick plug of it would have created an airtight lock, preventing the most valuable components of a perfume or medicine from evaporating into the dry desert air. This was not just a lid, it was a preservation system designed to keep volatile essences intact for months or even years. So where does the mysterious iron rod fit into this simple storage theory? It could have served a surprisingly mundane purpose. Once the valuable liquid was nearly gone, the rod would be the perfect tool to scrape the last precious drops from the bottom and sides of the narrow copper cylinder. Alternatively, it might have been a primitive stirrer used to mix the contents before each use, ensuring the potion or fragrance was perfectly blended. This explanation paints a very different picture of the artifact. It is not a mystical battery or a sealed reliquary, but the ancient equivalent of a carefully crafted apothecary jar, perhaps belonging to a wealthy merchant, a physician, or a temple priest. It represents not a spark of forgotten technology, but a universal human desire to save and savor something beautiful or beneficial. Yet this theory, while practical, also feels almost too ordinary for such a deliberately engineered object. Would a simple storage jar require such a precise assembly, with an iron rod suspended perfectly within a copper sleeve, all hidden inside a clay pot? The quest for the truth forces us to look beyond the object itself, to the very place where it was found and the company it kept. The true identity of this artifact is tangled in the very soil where it was found. Wilhelm Koenig originally dated the battery to the Parthian period, around 200 years before the Common Era. This was a time of immense crossroads where the knowledge of the Greeks met the traditions of Mesopotamia and the influences of Persia. The Parthians were brilliant administrators and warriors, masters of trade and cultural fusion, yet their legacy is not one of radical technological invention. Later re-examinations of the excavation site, however, suggested the jar might be younger, possibly from the subsequent Sasanian Empire, which ruled from the 3rd to the 7th centuries. The Sasanians were different, famous for their grand engineering projects, intricate art, and a flourishing of the sciences, including medicine and astronomy. This is a crucial distinction. Was the battery a product of the cosmopolitan Parthian era, or the more scientifically ambitious Sasanian period? Neither civilization, for all their achievements, left behind a single hint that they understood or harnessed electrical power. Their known innovations were practical, built on established principles of mechanics, hydraulics, and chemistry. This context makes the battery an even deeper anomaly. It does not fit the established pattern. Finding a device like this in ancient Rome or Greece would be surprising, but finding it in Mesopotamia is like discovering a single, sophisticated microchip in a workshop from the Renaissance, a piece of advanced knowledge that appears to have no logical precursor or successor. This forces a difficult question. Could a civilization make such a leap in isolation, only for that knowledge to vanish without a trace, leaving this one clay pot as its only legacy? The silence of history suggests we are missing a vital piece of the puzzle, one that might lie not in the object's power but in its perceived purpose. This silence is the single greatest argument against the battery. If this was a known technology, even a specialized one, we should find its echoes everywhere. We should see a trail of evidence, a constellation of similar devices scattered across the ancient world. Yet we have only a handful of these peculiar jars, all from a relatively confined region. Where are the others? Where are the workshops with rows of these pots, the caches of corroded wires, or the tools of the electroplating artisan? A revolutionary invention does not appear in a vacuum and then vanish without a ripple. For every complex technology, there is a supporting infrastructure, a context of use that leaves its mark. We find ancient forges littered with slag, scribble schools filled with practice tablets, and apothecaries stocked with labeled vials. For the Baghdad Battery, that supporting world is entirely absent. This forces us to apply a fundamental principle of rational inquiry, Occam's razor. This principle suggests that when faced with competing explanations for a phenomenon, the simplest one that requires the fewest assumptions is usually correct. The battery theory requires us to make a cascade of assumptions. We must assume the ancients discovered electrochemistry, then developed a specific vessel to harness it, then used it for a purpose like electroplating, and then somehow lost all knowledge of it along with every tool and text referring to it. The scroll storage theory, by contrast, is far simpler. It requires only that we see a sealed jar as a sealed jar, designed to protect a valuable, perishable object from decay using materials and methods we know they possessed. It asks for no undiscovered scientific principles, no lost workshops, and no silent conspiracy of history. The simplest explanation is that it was an exceptional container for a sacred text or a precious substance, not a 2,000-year-old power cell. Yet the human mind is drawn to the extraordinary. The idea of ancient electricity is a spark that ignites our imagination in a way a simple storage jar never could. This leaves us with one final, haunting possibility. What if we are not just missing the evidence, but we are also missing the entire point? The asphalt stopper is far more than a simple plug. It is the key that could unlock the entire mystery. This dark, tarry substance, known to the ancients as bitumen, was a common and vital resource throughout Mesopotamia, naturally bubbling up from the ground in vast seeps. Its waterproof and adhesive qualities made it the region's industrial strength glue, used for everything from caulking boats to cementing bricks. For the battery theory, this asphalt cap is a brilliant piece of engineering. Its primary function would be as an electrical insulator. By completely sealing the top of the jar, it would prevent the electrolyte from sloshing out, but more importantly, it would force any electrical current to flow through a potential external circuit, like a wire connecting the two metals. Without this insulator, the current would simply take a short, useless path straight through the liquid from the iron rod to the copper cylinder, and the battery effect would be completely lost. The presence of such a perfect, naturally occurring insulator seems like a powerful clue pointing toward an electrochemical purpose. Yet, this very same property makes even more sense for the storage theory. If your goal is to preserve a sacred scroll or a volatile perfume for decades, you need a perfect, airtight seal. Bitumen is unmatched in this role. It would create a hermetic barrier, locking out the moisture and oxygen that would decay parchment or evaporate precious essences. The iron rod, suspended through the center of this plug, would not compromise the seal, as the thick, viscous asphalt would have been pressed tightly around it, forming a permanent, waterproof gasket. So the asphalt seal is a double-edged sword. It is precisely what you would need for a functioning battery, but it is also exactly what you would use for high-stakes preservation. Its presence does not confirm one theory over the other. Instead, it deepens the enigma, revealing an object so perfectly designed that it fits multiple, equally plausible narratives from our distant past. The Baghdad Battery is not alone in its defiance of history. Scattered across the ancient world are a handful of other artifacts that seem to whisper secrets of forgotten knowledge. Consider the Antikythera mechanism, a complex bronze gearwork device recovered from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck near Greece. For decades, its corroded fragments were a baffling curiosity, until modern imaging revealed it to be an intricate astronomical calculator, capable of predicting planetary movements and eclipses with stunning precision. It stands as a solitary masterpiece of engineering, a clockwork universe in a box with no known precursor or successor in the classical world. Then there are the reliefs within the Temple of Dendera in Egypt, which some interpret as depicting massive, pear-shaped light bulbs, complete with snaking cables and supportive pillars that look like modern insulators. Mainstream Egyptology identifies these as symbolic representations of a lotus flower spawning a snake, a manifestation of the sun god emerging from the primordial waters. Yet the visual similarity to electrical apparatus is uncanny, fueling endless speculation. What connects these objects from the clay jar in Baghdad to the bronze gears in the Aegean Sea is their profound isolation. Each one appears as a sudden, sophisticated spark in the historical record, unconnected to any known technological lineage. They are the ultimate outliers, forcing us to confront a difficult choice. Do they represent brilliant but dead-end inventions, technologies that were discovered, used for a specialized purpose, and then lost when that specific need or the craftsman who understood them vanished? Or are they fragile evidence of a broader, more advanced understanding of the natural world that has been almost entirely erased by the passage of centuries? This is the fundamental rift in how we interpret our past. Mainstream archaeology, bound by a rigorous demand for corroborating evidence, cautiously labels them anomalies, extraordinary objects that await a conventional explanation grounded in the known practices of their time. Alternative history, however, sees them as proof of a grander narrative, where ancient civilizations possessed insights we have only recently rediscovered. The debate itself reveals our own deep desire to find lost wisdom, to believe that the past holds mysteries more profound than we ever imagined. Wilhelm Koenig was not merely a digger in the dirt, he was a man shaped by a specific and electrifying moment in history. Arriving in Iraq in the early 1930s, he was part of a wave of European archaeologists drawn to the cradle of civilization. But Koenig had a unique edge. He was also a trained painter and a conservator of artifacts, working for the Iraqi Museum at a time when the modern world was falling in love with electricity. Radios were becoming common, power grids were expanding, and the very air seemed to crackle with the promise of this new, invisible force. It is against this backdrop that he encountered the peculiar clay jar. His background is the crucial filter through which this object was first understood. As a conservator, he was intimately familiar with ancient materials, but as a man of his time, his mind was primed to see patterns that resembled the technology revolutionizing his own world. Was his interpretation an act of brilliant cross-temporal insight, or a classic case of seeing what one wants to see? Koenig's own writings reveal a man convinced by the object's deliberate design. He saw the specific choice of two different metals, the careful insulation with asphalt, and the perfect suspension of the iron rod within the copper cylinder. To him, this was not a random arrangement, it was a blueprint. He published his theory that these were ancient galvanic cells, possibly used for electroplating gold onto silver, and the idea, though controversial, instantly captured the public imagination. It was a perfect story for the age, a tale of lost genius that flattered the modern sense of progress while hinting at a secret, sophisticated past. Yet his professional standing was complex. While a respected museum official, he was not a formally credentialed archaeologist in the traditional, academic sense. This left him vulnerable to criticism from the established scholarly community, who could dismiss his theory as the work of an imaginative outsider, an over-interpreter projecting modern wonders onto ancient artifacts. The debate over the battery is, in many ways, a debate about Koenig himself. Do we trust the trained eye of the practical conservator who handled countless artifacts, or do we side with the academics who demand a paper trail of evidence that simply does not exist? His legacy is the mystery itself, a question mark he planted in the historical record that continues to challenge our assumptions about the pace and direction of human invention. The Mythbusters episode on the Baghdad Battery did more than just test a theory. It transformed an obscure archaeological debate into a living room spectacle. Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman approached the mystery with their signature blend of scientific rigor and explosive showmanship, treating the ancient jar not as a fragile relic, but as a working hypothesis to be built, tested, and stressed. Their investigation was a multi-stage journey into the possible. First, they constructed a series of exact replicas using terracotta pots, copper sheets, and iron rods sealed with natural asphalt. They then experimented with various electrolytes that would have been readily available 2,000 years ago, from vinegar to grape juice. The moment of truth was both simple and profound when they connected a voltmeter to their first replica filled with lemon juice. The needle jumped, confirming that the assembly could indeed generate a measurable electric current. But a single volt was barely a whisper, so they pushed further. They wired 10 of their clay pot batteries together in a series, creating a battery pack that produced a more substantial charge. This was the critical step that moved the concept from a curious novelty to a potentially useful tool. With this stacked power source, they successfully electroplated a small silver statue with a thin layer of gold, a process that was slow but undeniably effective. The visual was stunning, a modern team using an ancient design to perform a kind of alchemy, making one metal visibly transform into another right before the cameras. Their final verdict was not a definitive yes, but a carefully weighed plausible. They concluded that while the ancients certainly had the means and materials to create such a device, and that it could have been used for electroplating, there was no smoking gun to prove that this was its actual purpose. This verdict, broadcast to millions, granted the theory a new level of legitimacy. It was no longer just a fringe idea. It was a plausible historical scenario that had passed the test of modern experimental archaeology. The episode gave the mystery a powerful, mainstream validation, ensuring that the humble clay pot from Baghdad would forever spark the imagination of a whole new generation. 1 volt of electricity feels like almost nothing. It is a faint whisper of power, a sensation so subtle you might miss it entirely. This leads to the most practical of all questions. Even if the Baghdad Battery worked, was its output actually useful for anything at all? A single cell producing barely enough power to make your tongue tingle seems utterly insignificant. It could not light a lamp, power a motor, or run any device we would recognize. The true potential, however, might not have been in a single jar, but in a connected network of them. If several of these batteries were linked together in a series with the copper of one connected to the iron of the next, their individual voltages would have added up. 10 jars could have produced 10 volts, a substantial charge capable of delivering a distinct and painful shock. This simple principle of connecting power sources in series was well within the grasp of ancient metalworkers who regularly created complex alloys and intricate solder joints. The real mystery is not whether they could have done it, but whether they ever did. No such battery stacks have ever been found. There are no traces of metal wires or leads that would have been necessary to connect them into a functional power bank. This absence is a silent chasm between theoretical possibility and archaeological proof. So what could someone do with a low, steady current, even from just 1 or 2 cells? The applications shift from the industrial to the intimate and the mystical. Ancient medical texts from other cultures, including the Greeks and Egyptians, describe using the numbing power of electric fish to treat pain. A physician might have applied the mild current from a small battery directly to a patient's temple to soothe a persistent headache or to a sore joint to ease inflammation. It would have been a mysterious and powerful form of therapy, a hidden energy channeled for healing. Beyond medicine, imagine the spectacle in a darkened temple. A priest holding 2 metal rods connected to a hidden bank of these jars could have created a tiny, visible spark in the air. To a congregation believing entirely in the will of the gods, this would not be a trick of chemistry, but a miracle. It would be a tangible manifestation of divine power, a sacred energy that the priest alone could command. The value of such a device was not in its brute force, but in its subtle control over an invisible and awe-inspiring force. It was not about lighting up a room, but about illuminating the human spirit with wonder, fear, or relief. The true power of the Baghdad Battery may have been its profound psychological impact. A faint, controllable tingle coursing through your fingers would have felt like magic in a world without scientific explanation. This is the heart of the ritualistic theory, where the battery's true power was not in lighting a room, but in illuminating faith. Imagine a priest in a darkened, incense-filled chamber, holding 2 metal rods connected to a hidden clay jar. As he completes the circuit, a subtle vibration passes into his hands, a sensation he interprets as the direct touch of a god. This was not a trick, but a sacrament. The device became a conduit for the divine, a tool to bridge the gap between the mortal and the spiritual realms. We know that ancient cultures were deeply familiar with the raw, untamed power of electricity in nature, particularly from one remarkable source, the electric catfish. This river-dwelling creature, which can deliver a powerful shock to stun its prey, was documented by the Egyptians. They saw its ability to numb and tingle from a distance as a form of magic. Greek and Roman physicians later wrote about using these very fish for therapeutic purposes, applying them directly to patients to alleviate headaches or gout, channeling that wild, painful jolt into a form of healing. The leap from harnessing a living fish to creating a static, controllable device is not so large. If you can capture the essence of a miraculous fish in a clay pot, you domesticate a wonder. A priest could produce a consistent, predictable tingling sensation on demand, something far more reliable and less dangerous than handling a live animal. This transforms the artifact from a simple jar into a powerful ritual object. The sensation itself becomes a form of sacred language, a physical proof of a deity's presence during an initiation rite or an oracle's trance. The value of such an object would be incalculable, explaining why so few have been found. They were not common tools but closely guarded secrets of the temple, used by a select few to command awe and demonstrate a direct line to forces beyond human understanding. This deep divide over the Baghdad Battery reveals a fundamental clash not just of ideas but of entire professional worldviews. On one side, you have the archaeologists and historians, the detectives of the human past. Their case is built on context, on the company an object keeps. A leading voice of skepticism, Professor Elizabeth Stone of Stony Brook University, encapsulates this view, stating, "We have to interpret artifacts within their cultural framework. If we found just one of these with no wires, no corroded rods from acid, and no depictions of its use in art or text, the simplest explanation is that it was not a battery." For these scholars, an artifact without a story, without a supporting cast of related objects and records, is an anomaly, not evidence of a lost technology. They see a sealed jar and ask what it was meant to preserve, not what it was meant to power. Their discipline is built on a bedrock of corroborating evidence, and for the battery theory, that bedrock is simply not there. The silence is evidence in itself. In contrast, engineers and experimental physicists approach the object not as a historical puzzle, but as a functional design. They look at the components and see a system. Dr. Arne Egebrecht, a former museum director who actually conducted electroplating experiments with replicas, argued the combination of two different metals and an electrolyte is not an accident. It is a blueprint for a galvanic cell. From this technical perspective, the object's purpose is self-evident in its very construction. An engineer sees the asphalt seal and recognizes a perfect insulator. They see the suspended iron rod and recognize an anode. They are trained to see how things work, and this assembly works remarkably well as a simple battery. The friction arises because one group is asking, where is the proof it was used, while the other is stating, the proof is in its function. This is not a simple case of right versus wrong. It is a collision between two different ways of knowing. The historian demands a paper trail, while the engineer points to the working prototype. The debate persists because both sides are, in their own way, correct. The object does function, yet it stands alone in the archaeological record, a solitary genius with no known family. This leaves us suspended between two compelling realities, forcing us to question whether our standard methods for understanding the past are equipped to recognize a spark of genius that flickered only once before being swallowed by the darkness of time. The undeniable proof from these modern experiments has turned the Baghdad Battery into a favorite project for science enthusiasts around the world. In classrooms and home workshops, people have recreated this ancient puzzle using nothing more than clay pots, copper, iron, and everyday electrolytes like vinegar or lemon juice. The result is always the same. A small but measurable voltage appears, bringing the past to life with a flicker of a voltmeter's needle. Universities and museums have embraced these replicas as powerful educational tools. They offer a tangible, hands-on way to demonstrate the fundamental principles of electrochemistry. showing students how a simple chemical reaction between two different metals can generate a flow of electrons. This practical demonstration demystifies a concept that can seem abstract in a textbook, making the basic science behind every modern battery instantly understandable. Yet, for all their illuminating power, these replicas share the same fundamental limitation. They brilliantly demonstrate what the object could do, but they offer no new evidence for what the ancients actually did with it. Every successful experiment confirms the device's potential, yet none can cross the chasm into historical proof. We are left with a beautiful, functioning model that answers the how perfectly, while leaving the why completely shrouded in mystery. This gap between capability and purpose is where the true intrigue of the Baghdad Battery will always lie, a silent question posed by a simple clay jar. Perhaps the greatest limitation is our own modern perspective, which insists every invention must have a single, defined purpose. We see a clay pot and demand it be either a battery or a storage jar. But what if the truth is more fluid, more human? This object could have been both, a multifunctional tool whose primary use was preservation, but whose secondary, accidental property was a source of wonder. Imagine a priest carefully storing a sacred scroll, sealing it with asphalt to protect it for eternity. One day, moisture seeps into the jar, perhaps from a flood or simple humidity. This moisture, slightly acidic from the soil, comes into contact with the copper cylinder and the iron rod. Over time, a faint chemical reaction begins. The priest, upon retrieving the scroll, feels a strange, buzzing tingle when his moist fingers touch both the iron and the copper at the same time. He would not have called it electricity, but he would have recognized it as a power, a vibration, a sign. The very object designed to protect holy words was now emanating a mysterious energy. In this light, the Baghdad Battery is not an anomaly, but a beautiful accident waiting to be found. Ancient technology was rarely as specialized as our own. A single tool could serve multiple roles across different aspects of life. A sharp obsidian blade could be used for surgery, for ritual sacrifice, or for carving wood. A clay pot could hold grain, water, or a departed loved one's ashes. The value of an object was in its utility and its symbolic weight, not in its adherence to a narrow functional category. This vessel could have begun its life as a secure container for a volatile perfume or a temple scroll. Its ingenious design made it perfectly airtight. Yet, that same design, entirely by chance, also made it capable of a minor electrochemical reaction. The discovery of that reaction would not have led to an industrial revolution, but it might have transformed the object's spiritual significance. The jar that preserved sacred words could now also produce a sacred sensation, a physical manifestation of the divine power it was built to protect. It became twice holy. This synthesis resolves the conflict between the theories. The archaeologists are right, it was a storage vessel. The engineers are also right, it can function as a battery. The two ideas are not mutually exclusive. They are two sides of the same beautifully crafted clay coin. The real mystery is not what it was made for, but what it became in the hands of someone who felt its secret power and understood in their bones that they were holding more than just a jar. History is filled with moments of brilliant accident. What if the Baghdad Battery's most startling property was never its intended purpose? Consider the chance discovery of penicillin, when Alexander Fleming returned from vacation to find a mysterious mold-killing bacteria in his Petri dishes. He was not looking for a world-changing antibiotic, he was studying influenza. That fortunate contamination revolutionized modern medicine. The same principle of serendipity could apply to our humble clay jar. A priest storing a sacred scroll might have first sealed it with a perfect asphalt plug to keep out moisture. Then, one humid season, water seeped in, mixing with natural acids from the soil or the vessel itself. His fingers, damp with sweat or ritual oils, might have brushed against both the iron rod and the copper cylinder at the same moment. a faint, unexpected tingle would have shot through his hand. In that instant, the object transformed. It was no longer just a protective container. It had become a source of a strange, vibrating energy. This would not have been understood as electricity, but as a sign, a divine presence, or a hidden power emanating from the sacred words within. The very act of preservation could have accidentally revealed a startling secondary function. Such a discovery would not have led to a technological revolution. Without a framework of understanding, this spark of knowledge would have remained a curiosity, a tool for ritual awe rather than a foundation for engineering. It becomes a beautiful dead end, a forgotten whisper of potential. This possibility reminds us that ancient innovation was not always a straight line of progress. Sometimes the most fascinating chapters of history are not about what was built, but about the beautiful, accidental sparks that flickered once and then faded quietly into the dark. The Baghdad Battery has escaped the dusty shelves of archaeology to become a star player in tales of lost civilizations and otherworldly visitors. In these narratives, this humble clay pot is not just an anomaly, it is definitive proof that our history books are wrong. Some claim it powered advanced technology for a forgotten global culture, perhaps the fabled Atlantis, whose wisdom was wiped out by a great cataclysm. Others take the leap further, suggesting the design was too sophisticated for ancient minds and must have been a gift from extraterrestrial beings, a primitive battery left behind to help humanity along. These stories are compelling, painting a picture of a past filled with glowing temples and electric chariots. The artifact's appeal is easy to understand. It is a tangible, physical object that seems to bridge our modern, electric world with a mysterious ancient one. It represents a tantalizing what-if, a single thread that, if pulled, could unravel the entire tapestry of conventional history. Yet, when we separate these grand claims from the physical evidence, the thread phrase, the leap from a 1-volt cell to powering an ancient civilization is a chasm with no bridge. There are no ancient power grids, no light bulb filaments, or electric motors found anywhere in the archaeological record. The battery exists in utter isolation, a solitary component without a system to support it. The more extraordinary the claim, as the saying goes, the more extraordinary the evidence required. For lost high technology or alien contact, that evidence simply does not exist. The true power of the Baghdad Battery, it seems, lies not in the electricity it might have held, but in the powerful human desire for a past that is more mysterious and more magnificent than we ever dreamed. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the Baghdad Battery is that it forces us to confront our own reflection in the artifacts we unearth. Are we looking at the ancient world, or are we seeing our own technological desires projected onto it? Our modern lives are built on a foundation of electricity and complex machinery, so it is natural for us to interpret a carefully assembled object of copper and iron through that lens. We see a circuit board where an artisan might have seen a secure vessel. This is the trap of technological bias, the assumption that progress must follow a straight, upward line that mirrors our own. But human ingenuity is rarely so orderly. Breakthroughs can be sporadic, isolated, and deeply contextual. A culture might develop an intricate understanding of astronomy to track seasons for agriculture, yet have no use for the wheel. Another might master hydraulic engineering to supply a city with water, yet never develop a written alphabet. Innovation is driven by need, by environment, and by the specific questions a society asks of the world. The Baghdad Battery does not fit our linear model of progress. It is a solitary, brilliant flicker in the archaeological record with no clear before or after. This makes us deeply uncomfortable. We want to either slot it into a familiar category like a battery or dismiss it as a mundane storage jar because both options keep the past neatly contained. What if the truth is something far more challenging? What if it represents a form of genius we have simply forgotten how to see? a kind of knowledge that was never meant to power machines, but to serve a purpose we can no longer fully grasp. This object's enduring mystery is not a failure of archaeology, but a triumph. It reminds us that the past is not a solved puzzle, but a living conversation. It asks us to be humble, to acknowledge that an ancient craftsman's mind worked within a framework of symbols, materials, and spiritual beliefs that may be forever lost to us. The battery's true power, then, may not be in the volts it could produce, but in the volts of curiosity it sends sparking through our own minds, challenging us to see the ancient world as a place of countless possibilities, not just a prelude to our own. The physical evidence itself has now become part of a modern tragedy. The original Baghdad Battery artifacts, along with countless other priceless relics, were housed in the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad. For decades, they sat in display cases and storage rooms, silent witnesses to their own enduring mystery. Then, in the chaos following the invasion in 2003, the museum was brutally looted. Thieves smashed cabinets and ransacked collections, stealing and destroying irreplaceable pieces of human history. The fate of the original batteries is heartbreakingly unclear. They are believed to have been stolen, lost, or perhaps even shattered amidst the violence. These objects that had survived for 2,000 years, protected by the very earth that buried them, were lost in a single moment of modern conflict. Their disappearance is a profound loss, not just for archaeologists, but for all of us. They were tangible links to a forgotten spark of ingenuity, and now they are gone, their secrets potentially lost forever. This event sparked a global outcry and led to renewed, desperate efforts to protect and recover Iraq's cultural heritage. Interpol alerts were issued, and museum curators worldwide began a painstaking inventory of what was missing. While some treasures have been miraculously recovered over the years, the iconic batteries remain absent. Their story is now a double mystery, a puzzle of ancient purpose compounded by a modern crime. This loss forces us to recognize that these artifacts are not just academic curiosities. They are fragile, non-renewable resources. Every piece that is stolen or destroyed is a page torn from the collective story of humanity, a voice from the past permanently silenced. The legacy of the Baghdad Battery is now also a cautionary tale about the vulnerability of our shared history in a fractured world. So where does this leave us after sifting through all the clues? The evidence for an ancient battery is undeniably captivating. The object's design is a perfect blueprint for a galvanic cell, with its two different metals, an electrolyte and an insulating seal. Modern experiments prove it works, capable of producing a small current and even electroplating when multiple cells are linked. This function aligns beautifully with the culture's known expertise in fine metalworking. The arguments against this theory, however, carry significant weight. The complete absence of wires, the lack of distinctive acid corrosion on the iron rods, and the total silence in art and text about electricity or its applications form a wall of negative evidence. No other artifacts like it have been found in a workshop context, leaving it a profound and solitary anomaly. When we turn to the storage theories, the case is simpler but equally strong. The vessel's airtight construction is ideal for preserving sacred scrolls from decay or protecting volatile perfumes and medicines from evaporation. This purpose fits seamlessly within the known cultural practices of the time, requiring no assumptions about lost scientific knowledge. The preponderance of the archaeological evidence, therefore, leans away from a technological interpretation. While we cannot rule out that some ancient artisan discovered the tingling effect, the most plausible primary purpose was preservation. It was likely a specialized container for something precious, whether words, scents, or potions, its ingenious design serving a timeless human need to save and sanctify what is most valuable. The battery's true legacy is not a rewritten history of technology, but a permanent question mark that challenges us to keep looking, reminding us that a single object can hold many truths within its simple clay walls. That simple clay pot, unearthed nearly a century ago, has taken us on an incredible journey from a dusty excavation site to the forefront of a modern debate. We have followed the clues from its precise internal components to the shocking proof of its electrical potential, and weighed it against the quiet logic of its use as a sacred container. We stand now not with a final answer, but with a profound appreciation for the mystery itself. The true power of the Baghdad Battery is not in the volts it may have held, but in the volts of curiosity it sends sparking through our minds. It challenges our neat timelines of progress and forces us to confront the limits of our own understanding. This artifact is a permanent question mark in the human story, a reminder that the past is not a solved puzzle but a living, breathing conversation. So now we turn the final decision over to you. After hearing all the evidence, what is your verdict? Was it an ancient battery, a sacred vessel, or something else entirely? Cast your vote in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into history's greatest puzzles, be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the unknown.